有不足能不能放过这一次？下辈子我只想做个不会被秒的孩子，没有护卫，没有导弹，也没有英俊出世，用最能一开着就能消灭死情的 boss。孙悟空难不能放过这一次？有时候明明很累，却不知道为什么要坚持。自创制，在击碎内心坚强的长翅，不去存档，对着冷气百草的彼此一晒了之。历经漫漫，又耍无完不坏，血条太短，把身创已经是上，这死情的难度，谁不抓狂？谁不是在阻止的别人苦求着现状？想要用魔法解开祭坛的高尚，谁不是我在弹幕中只需微弱的光？也曾经历过失败，也曾装备被打坏，在最无常的日子里一番从头来。有不足能不能放过这一次？下辈子我只想做个不会被秒的孩子，没有护卫，没有导弹，也没有英俊出世，用最乐意配合就能消灭死情的 boss。孙悟空能不能放过这一次？有时候明明很累，却不知道为什么要坚持。一次创制，在击碎内心坚强的长翅，不去存档，对着冷气百草的彼此一晒了之。
Greetings pilots, Wizard Jerry here, welcome to the 8th DMZ Dogfight competition, the grand final in this series, because we know Wrath of the Ancients is the last DLC of Everspace 2. But in the future I will make one or maybe more Everspace video in collaboration with Mcnair, a very skilled pilot in our Chinese community, talk about some other builds we can use in game. I will also add English subtitles for that video as well so that you guys can understand. Okay, enough chit chat, let's see what's going on with this DLC. Once again, we got plenty of powerful new gears. Moreover, some tweaks and changes make a number of Titans items more useful. So personally speaking, I'm very satisfied with this DLC. Good job, Rockfish Games. I'm posting a few new gears that I think is powerful on the screen while we speak. And of course, we need more challenging enemies to fight. So the lunacy cap has increased to 4000. And this is not simply increasing enemies' damage and hit points, but also enemies' density in each stage, and number of enemies can shoot you at the same time. Meanwhile, when you bring an Okar reliquary to the ancient rifts, the boss in stage 4 will now be fixed as Okar frigate, a very tough one, well maybe. Based on these considerations above, in this video I will again show each ship a build followed by a speedrun showcase in Lunacy 4000 Rifts and fix a boss to Okar frigate. In case the reliquary may increase our damage or etc, here we specifically choose Sorrow as a blessing because this is very few cannot bring any bonus to your ship's performance. That says, I can assure you guys what you're gonna see here is still each ship's purest combat capability. I'm also listing a few good Titans items on the screen, and I have to say, the items that most worthy to farm herein is the Judgment Day. Firstly, the self-damaging has been removed, so we'll no longer randomly, kill yourself. And another thing is, due to a display bug, its stats, the damage displayed here, is rather underestimated. I'm not going too deep about the theory, but in short, if you are holding a Radiant Judgment Day with 10 seconds duration, the actual damage is much higher than it is displayed here, roughly like times 1.67. The result of that is you will see every single ship in this video has equipped Judgment Day, simply because that's a lot of damage. So that means if you don't have Titans DLC, my apologies for that, because the build in this video may not fit you well. Alright, let's showcase ship's paint job first, shall we?
Yahaha! Horror show! 甘く見ていい相手ではない。 在下是臣风暴烈酒，行不更名，坐不改姓。
狼よ、我が血と共に生きてくれ。
はじめまして、僕は第4ロール総成績。あなたが僕のマスター？
ああ、やっとません、達成。
はじめまして、いざよい咲夜ですわ。
让你们见识一下全奈流人法。お前の影をこの矢で釘付けにしてやる。
Okay, as usual, let's look at the bomber first, but not as usual. This time we have finally changed the build. We drop Isle of the Storm and now running with 2 Judgment Days for DPS and 1 EMP mine. That's how you trigger exploitation. Don't worry about guarding mutator in stage 4 because we are fighting a frigate. The stage 4 mutator will only be one of Apocalypse, Face Barrier or Stasis Stare. That allows us to slot an Eradicator to make up the Redemption set bonus 3 and apply Chaos Catalyst on one of your Judgment Day for higher damage. And of course, feel free to make tweaks on this build. For example, if you cannot get a lucky Chaos roll, drop the Redemption bonus and use Sovereign Catalyst on your Judgment Days. If you are a big fan of Destabilizer mines, okay, just swap 1 Judgment Days for that. And since Final Reckoning has been nerfed, Viscous Intent is becoming a great substitute. Just remember, this bomber build is acting as a general template, which means you can simply copy and paste to any other ships. Well, mostly. And the funny thing is, the new device, Entropy Anchor, gives every ship effectively unlimited secondary ammo, and meanwhile the bomber is slow and chunky that we know. It is no surprise that many medium and light ships can actually do better with the same build. Alright, move on to the Sentinel. We drop the Enforcer and pick the Voltaic Blaster, again over Penetration Catalyst. Then we replace Boomers with Judgment Days, replace Dogmatic Scanner with Warrior's Insight for higher critical hit chance. But wait, you may ask, how can we trigger exploitation without boomers to freeze enemies? Here we utilize Sentinel's passive, which gives you 10% chance to EMP enemies with your ultimate. But you may complain that, oh, the lightning gun doesn't feel that strong in Lunacy 4000. Well, yes and no. Here's a funny one. We have Entropy Anchor to reset the cooldown time. While this cooldown time is not limited to the device only, it also works with consumables. It increases 40% primary damage for 20 seconds and has a cooldown time of 20 seconds of course. If we use wisely, we can stack this effect to 80% for a short period, simply by using another one after Entropy Anchor resets your cooldown. And if we want, we can even stack it up to 120% for just a few seconds by proper timing and make use of the device recharger. But anyway, 80% damage bonus on Lightning Gun is quite effective dealing with enemies in Lunacy 4000 Rifts. Okay, in short, as your first ship in Everspace 2, Sentinel is definitely a nice ship to beat the main story, and now it also becoming a very good choice for high Lunacy Rifts. We know Entropy Anchor is a powerful and must-use device for higher Lunacy Rifts. but restricted by its cooldown time, most ship needs to bring as many device recharger so that they can enjoy its bonus. Is there any ship doesn't have to use device recharger? Stinger for the win. Remember what I said in maybe a previous video, Stinger's ultimate is a premium device recharger. Okay, now we are talking. Previously we have discussed using Sovereign Catalyst instead of Chaos and Redemption set bonus, so here let's test its feasibility with Stinger. Quickly go through the build. The solo scimitar laser can deal a ton of damage, but I made a little mistake here because I should use the tactical system core instead of the Zelius. However, it didn't affect my combat performance, I don't really mind. I'm emphasized to make sure you guys are using the correct one if you want to copy my build. To trigger exploitation while using Epicenter, a very nice booster that deals good damage and impair enemies' movements. For shield, I'm using Skirmisher Shield. The purpose here is simple. Try not to use Stratocumulus for light ship because they already have excellent mobility. The rare energy orbs will easily make your ship out of control. I'm also recommending Peacemaker and Energy Shield, these two consumables which really help with your survivability, especially the Energy Shield. If you are pissed off by the status steer, you really should get one because this one brings you resistivity to those bubbles. All in all, the Stinger in this update is not only strong but also absolute blast to play. It is intense, it is agile, and it is very much endgame viable. Time for some gunship. This build is mostly copied from the bomber template, but quick note, I messed up in the footage. I left a Voltaic blaster in the primary slot the whole run when I should have used the Eradicator to make up the redemption set. My apologies, my bad. But anyway, let's move on. In the bomber section, I mentioned Viscous Intent as a viable replacement for Final Reckoning, and this gunship build shows why. Since we have 2 Judgment Days, we drop the EMP generator and Epicenter, so we need another way to trigger exploitation. Viscous Intent can slow enemies down, and meanwhile, those ghoul balls allow you to deal extra damage to affected targets, effectively acting like a destabilizer source that work with our Judgment days or turret interactions. As a heavy ship, its mobility and the number of consumable slots are the main reason that lags its speedrun performance. Of course, it has overwhelming primary weapon firepower, but it is still insufficient to compensate these drawbacks, since primary weapon is more single-target focused rather than splash damage. Speaking of primary weapon, here I'm proposing another build. Swap Judgment Days with Shredder. Hi Eric. Use the Hesitate shield and put a repeater in the primary slot. That converts your firepower into much more splash damage. It is not a very speedrunning focused build, but a lot of fun. People have asked since the teaser, is Wraith a good ship to pilot? Well, to be honest, my opinion towards this ship is pretty much aligned with Yom, the quality assurance manager of Rockfish Games. It is not a powerful ship like Interceptor, but it does have some very fun moments. Look a bit in detail. Wraith has 4 consumable slots, which are great, but only 2 primary and 1 secondary slot, which is so limited. Looks familiar? Another ship with such setup is called Vindicator, yet Wraith doesn't have those explosive drones, but thankfully Wraith got a passive allows you have 30% chance to use consumable for free. Great, so that means we can expect Entropy Anchor covers a bit longer during the combat. Quick comment towards the ultimate and 4 devices from the speedrun perspective in Lunacy 4000. Siphon Pulse, let's be real, ignore it. Spectral Shift, well, I would like to say it is essentially a downgraded teleporter, and Vanish is extremely situational. You can literally trigger a double damage window if you activate this one right after your emergency shield pops. It is really powerful, but you will be lucky to use it only once per round. Resurgence is the main reason to use the ultimate. It solves Wraith's biggest weakness. As a medium ship, its speed is too slow, but collecting echo fragments increase your speed. Plus, the temporary minions you revived are great for drawing enemies' attention and adding some chaos. The main problem for speedrunning with Wraith is that you cannot use regular devices when the ultimate is activated. Meanwhile, the whole attenuation rate is a bit too low for speedrunning. So Wraith is exactly what its description says. An experimental prototype is packed with interesting new ideas that are fun to play with but also come with some rough edges. Now let's look at the Striker. The build largely follows the Gunship template, but we tweaked a tiny little bit to make it more powerful. Thanks to Striker's passive, which slows enemies down when you lock onto them, we don't need to worry about triggering exploitation. This allows us to use Scimitar Laser and, of course, again, the Judgment Day as our primary damage source. The rest 2 slots we can fill them with Eradicator and Soul Seeker. This setup completes the Redemption set bonus 3 without any catalyst. We can feel free to add Chaos Catalyst to both Judgment Days for massive damage. Meanwhile, Striker's ultimate Quantum Tether pairs exceptionally well with Judgment Days compared to mines or 0k boomers, because we know Judgment Day has a large damage radius of 500 meters. In close combat, activating your ultimate and firing Judgment Days will ensure that all enemies tested by the ultimate are hit twice. Once by the damage conducted from the primary targets that you locked, and again by the Judgment Day itself. This effectively doubles the damage, and remember, this is before accounting the Striker's special and ultimate damage bonuses. So that means at certain condition, especially when your ultimate is ready, Striker can deal even more damage than Interceptor, and that's enough to hit sub 3 minutes speedruns. If luck counts as part of my skill, then Vanguard absolutely nailed it. This Vanguard run was ridiculously lucky. Here, we tweaked the Stinger template a little bit for this build, mostly the shield and attributes. Remember, Vanguard is the most agile ship in the game, and that agility is a double-edged sword. Like I've said earlier, if you keep using Stratocumulus, you will risk yourself in out of control due to the rare energy orbs, but you have to keep your shield overcharged to gain some bonuses. So here I'm using a very niche pick, Tactical Shield. Why? Well, simply because this shield has no recharge delay. Okay, I know many of you guys are going to throw shoes at me, but hey, you are piloting a Vanguard. You are not supposed to get hit in Lunacy 4000 Rift, otherwise you're gonna one-shot and get kicked out by the Asians. The only damage we can prevent is a random collision, and since you have no recharge delay, it means you can quickly resume your shield overcharge condition after a collision. I get that not everyone will agree with this choice, so feel free to switch to the shields that fit your own style. And one more thing, although the clear time for this run looks insanely fast, but to be really honest, the RNG was absurdly generous, because in Lunacy 4000, Vanguards need to occasionally activate Time Extender to take a breath during the combat. That certainly slows down your clear time, but well, things just happened. I was so lucky to get blessed by the RNGesus. Vindicator has not really changed in terms of playstyle since it was released a few years ago, so I won't spend too much time on it. Quickly go through what's going on. First, the drone explosion damage scales with the new Lunacy cap, which is why the playstyle still works. However, a rare old bug seems to have returned, the one that can prevent your ultimate from fully charged. If you noticed your ultimate gauge is stuck at 100 but won't activate, quickly switch to your devotion, fire one shot and switch back. That should fix it. And that should be enough for Vindicator. It is a fantastic ship for clearing Lunacy 4000 Rift with lowest quality gear, but as always, it is not a top choice for speedrunning. let's move on to the Scout. Same rule as always. Light ships should avoid using stratocumulus, otherwise the mobility gets way too high and just cause some unnecessary trouble. But since the primary weapon we are using is scimitar laser, even though our expertise and passive can extend its range, we are still in close combat with enemies. Compared with the other two light colleagues, Scout doesn't have time extender nor the peacemaker, so here we choose Hesage shield to prevent being instantly killed, because if you get a really lucky chaos roll, you can stack this dodging rate up to 98%. Well, actually, if you consider the number after the decimal, the maximum dodging rate you can have is, well, 100.8%, literally invincible as long as you are surrounded by at least 7 enemies. I also made a little mistake here. For your level 20 perk, I recommend Arterial Motif, but I mistakenly selected Critical Faculty during the combat. Apologize for that. And another thing I maybe should have to address earlier is don't get confused by my level 10 perk choice, because these 3 perks don't really matter in the entire speedrun showcase for all ships. One more thing, ever since the rework of Shadow Strike, firing your weapon will now cancel the cloak effect. Not only the cloak effect from the ultimate, but also the cloak generator consumable. This means the 10% increased damage during cloak attribute is not working for Scout. What a pain. That's effectively 40% potential damage bonus gone, but even that happens, Scout remains a rock solid second place in Rift speedrun. I know what you guys are waiting for. Okay, here we are introducing the pride of the colonial fleet, the community's beloved ship, the one holding the best passive and ultimate, the shining star that combines stunning looks with brutal strength, the dominator of the ancient rift, the best of the best. Meet the Interceptor Orion A3. Ooh. Now, quickly go through the build. Here we basically copy and paste the Striker's build, but since we have 3 secondary weapon slots, we can add an additional EMP mine for exploitation. That means we can further enhance our damage by equipping a Final Reckoning. Well, although the Reckoning stacking rate has been nerfed from 5% per shot to 3%, but remember, we are piloting an Interceptor. Once you activate the weapon overdrive, we have 50% increased fire rate for all your weapons, and we also have a passive that increases fire rate by 20% when you enter a new location and lasts for 60 seconds. Therefore, such nerf is basically nothing. But again, feel free to replace it with Viscous Intent. And never forget, the Interceptor has 3 primary, secondary, and consumable slots. This makes it the ultimate weapon platform for testing your own playstyle. We will explore more build variants later with Winged Nightmare, but for now, sit back and watch how Interceptor smashes Lunacy 4000 Rift.